Alright, so we have a lot to talk about this week, considering it is not only a very long episode, the longest in the show's history, I believe, but also this kind of climactic clash between the armies of the living and the dead, and surprisingly, it's going to be the first and last clash, it seems. This episode, I'm going to be talking primarily, I think, about a lot of the technical stuff that went into actually making this episode, a lot about the actual production and the way this episode was delivered, because of course, in a battle, you have less kind of plot elements in play, and it's more about the ebb and flow of combat and who's winning, who's losing. So I'm going to be talking about that a bit more this episode, but of course, we do have a lot of very big events to actually talk about, so let's dive in. A reminder once again that if you guys enjoy listening to me talk about Game of Thrones, I have a video, a love letter on my second channel that you can check out, which is basically me kind of gushing about the things that made me fall in love with this show. So please check that out if you enjoy what I have to say here today. Now, of course, this week was exciting for me more than anything because it's an episode directed by Miguel Sapochnik, who last did Winds of Winter, and of course, Battle of the Bastards, my two favorite episodes of this show. Mainly, you know me, I very much get around how things are made, I guess more than the plot elements, and those two episodes were absolutely phenomenal. So it was super exciting seeing what he was going to do. I'm going to talk about him a lot and a lot of the choices he made, but before that, I just need to make sure I talk about the music because I forget to talk about it nearly every week. And again, not only did this episode just deploy leitmotifs fantastically, a lot of the character themes getting strewn into the music throughout the battle. Of course, you've got the Night King theme, that kind of ticking that popped up as that kind of wall of, I guess, the blizzard turned up, which was visually fantastic. Big Mad Max Fury Road vibes with that. And no, music in the last 15 minutes. Wowzers, again, whipping out this kind of piece of music that has not yet been used in the show to kind of heighten a moment when you hear a new theme that's meant to stand out, that's meant to be new like that. I think it kind of heightens our emotional state, and it was already peaking because that was kind of when all hope was lost, I guess, in terms of the battle. We were really feeling that things were not going to go our heroes' ways, I guess. And, you know, a fantastic moment of building to, like, you know, Theon's heroic sacrifice, which, you know, I'm glad that he has been allowed that redemption. It's something I've talked about in the past. And I think that it was, you know, a reasonable way for him to go after all that he'd done, to go down defending his real family, I guess, the family that he has lived with his entire life until the betrayal. And I think going down defending them that way was the most heroic way he could go out. There was no way he was making it out of that situation, so that was the right way to go. But the Night King going after Bran like that, and then having Arya be the one to save the day. Now, I think there's going to be people that are going to have a lot of issues with that. I feel like people might feel cheated that it's not Bran himself who managed to do it, or Jon. I know that there's a lot of stuff in terms of the books and the lore in the books that seems to point towards Jon being, I believe, like a champion of the Lord of Light or something like that. But no, you think about it, Arya makes sense. No one killing death itself is quite a kind of powerful idea. I do have questions about how she managed to sneak up without anyone stopping her, considering she couldn't make it through the room in Winterfell without alerting the White Walkers, the Whites. So, you know, there's questions there, and there are a lot of questions like that throughout this episode. But, you know, from a pure logistical standpoint, I can barely, you know, be bothered by any of them because it's such a monumental achievement in filmmaking and so very difficult to do, so many things to juggle. The longest battle sequence of all time now, I believe, possibly the longest sustained battle sequence. So, you know, not much I can be mad about with any of that. Though I will say that I am incredibly surprised that the threat of the White Walkers has both started and ended here. Well, not started, but I felt like there was going to be much more of a conquest against Westeros. As I said last week, I expected Winterfell to fall, and I guess it did. But I expected Winterfell to fall, our heroes to be forced to retreat all the way to King's Landing, Cersei not letting them in, Jaime going in to try to convince her still saying no, let's burn them all, and we have a repeat of basically him repeating the cycle and having to kill his own sister. That would have been logical storytelling, satisfying storytelling, but that, I guess, is most likely not going to be the way it goes now that the White Walker threat has already been extinguished. Somewhat disappointed about that, but I think there's something interesting to be said there going forward as, for a long time I've been saying that the threat that our heroes is facing is not each other, but something far greater that they need to unite to overcome. And maybe that's not the case at all. Maybe the true villain at the end of the day, I hesitate to coin Cersei as a villain, but the true evil in humanity may still come from humanity itself and not an outside force. So that's an interesting idea. I'm interested to see what happens with it. I was of the belief that the Iron Throne wouldn't matter too much in the end, but it looks like it might matter way more than we thought. Now, I do need to address a technical aspect that has been kind of raised, an issue, I guess, that's been raised by a lot of people, was the darkness of this episode. First point to note there is that if you watched it in a compressed format, in Australia, the only way to legally view it, unless there's like a streaming service or a bought service. I'm on the streaming service. The streaming service file was super compressed. And when you're dealing with nighttime lighting and incredibly deep shadows, your image is going to look trash. So it's actually a testament to, I think, Miguel Sapochnik's direction that the clarity of the battle was still so clear and that I really only lost the image in the moments that were supposed to be overwhelming. So I understand people's issue, but for me, I couldn't be mad at it no matter what, because the sheer insanity of shooting a nighttime battle and lighting it only through fire and lights placed to replicate fire, so the light is always motivated. Many battle sequences, you'll notice that no matter what the setting is, the light is just coming from wherever it needs to. They actually stuck to Game of Thrones' realistic, grounded sense of lighting, and that's what the fire was used for here. So I actually think that's brilliant. Like, I'm actually incredibly impressed by that and the clarity of it still. The actual clarity of the battle in terms of the direction, astounding. Miguel Sapochnik understands the flow of how a battle's supposed to occur better than just about anyone these days. He really understands how to, of course, this is in conjunction with the writers, but understanding how a battle is supposed to flow from, maybe they've got the upper hand, no, they've got the upper hand, no, they've got the upper hand. And the episode worked that way consistently. You have moments that peak, like Melisandre returning and lighting all the Dothraki swords on fire, to them leading the charge in and seeing those lights on the horizon slowly get extinguished. You have that moment of elation. Maybe they can do this, maybe they can't. And the entire episode works that way. That's what gets us invested in it. And I do also have to say the survival horror elements that kind of rose in the final third of the episode. Very, very effective stuff in terms of pacing. I think we were all aware that the crypt was going to come under threat. So, adding those elements where it kept getting worse. You have moments where things go okay for a second and then they get worse. And that's so much about what the direction and the writing in this episode, that's what really worked for me, that they really understood what makes a good battle. The introduction of the blizzard when the Night King turned up was a fantastic visual idea. And there is somewhat of a downside to it with it making things even blurrier. There is an argument to be made for maybe the scene could have been shot at sunset or at night, and then if you introduce the blizzard, you can work with a far more dynamic lighting setup, though I do like the idea thematically of this long night, entering the long night, and hoping to see the dawn. I think that's the point, and that's why the ending of the episode, I think, had so much impact for me. Watching Davos see Melisandre walk out and her job is done. She has served the Lord of Light, and now she can let go, I guess, during the dawn. I think that's an incredibly powerful visual idea. And again, the fact that the creative team seeks out those things at all times is incredibly profound, and I really, really enjoy just there's so many moments where the episode understands the iconography of the series, understands what visually works for the characters. You know, there's some great frames. There's the one of the Hound, Arya, and Melisandre together. Just some really, really fantastic frames that, you know, at this stage, I've said it the last two episodes, the show has earned heroic moments. Yes, the writing may have moved beyond the cause and effect, and we might now be seeing the writing work in terms of setup and payoff with small gaps, maybe some larger than small gaps, but there's gaps in logic occasionally that can usually be argued around. But I do think that the show in its final season, we've got 3 episodes left, has earned the right to have ideas that were set up in previous seasons all the way as far back as season 1 and actually letting those things pay off now. Okay, we have to talk about dragon combat. I think it's something that we all expected from this episode, and yes, a lot of it was lost visually in the blizzard if you watched in a format that was unclear. But there was those shots when they broke through the blizzard up under the moon. Wowzers. I maintain that no one in this series shoots the dragons as well as Miguel Sapochnik. You can see the weight, he uses the crash zooms, he uses everything he can to give the dragons a sense of kind of, especially when you're flying with them, this scale, I guess. I feel like that was a pun in there, but we'll ignore that. There is a sense of weight to them, and there's an extra, you know, he doesn't shoot them like it's on horseback or he just does interesting things. There were some really fantastic shots with the Night King riding Viserion, considering I had issues with the way the dragons were shot in the previous seasons. It was great seeing them return to that and having that kind of tangle between, was it Rhaegal or Drogon and Viserion? I don't know, one of the they both ended up tangling at some point, and that was visually glorious. So many characters went down this episode, way less than I expected. A lot of characters made it through this episode after having quite distinct send-offs in the previous one, which I kind of respect because I think a lot of people find things predictable in the show now, and there's almost a great element of unpredictability to give a character a kind of send-off moment and then having them survive. I am astonished that Brienne made it through. I'm astonished that Grey Worm made it through. I'm kind of astonished that everyone in that room for that scene managed to get through this week alive. I think that shows that there might be a far more kind of vicious battle to come with Cersei's forces. So that's, you know, something that is still in play. But there were still characters that fell that, you know, crushing. Maybe first and foremost, Jorah Mormont. I think House Mormont has been wiped out now because Lyanna, the young chick, took out a giant. Amazing stuff. But yeah, she also fell on the battlefield, and that was incredibly powerful, I thought, having her fight till the end and her kind of command her troops on the ground. What a great little character they kind of decided to keep in and continue using, because I think it actually speaks a lot to the themes of the series to have someone that's so easy to underestimate kind of have so much power and so much pull and that. So that was incredible. But Jorah felt the only way he was ever going to, and it was defending his queen. He took a lot of hits and he managed to hold it together to get her through that. Obviously, Drogon couldn't be there. There was a moment, my panic in this episode peaked at the fact I was like, no, Drogon can't die yet. Please no, as all the walkers were climbing on him. There was a moment as well where I thought Rhaegal had been taken out by Viserion, but it looks like they're both alive. Interesting to see how that battle's going to go going forward with Daenerys having 2 dragons. I expected one of them to die. I thought Rhaegal and Viserion were both going to take each other out, and Drogon would be the only one left, and then of course someone's going to take him out with the bow or something, that giant bowcaster in the next episode. But I guess that might not be happening. We'll see where that goes. But Jorah, you know, he fell the only way he was ever going to fall. The power of Beric, kind of the Lord of Light, brought him to that moment, brought him back one last time to make sure Arya made it through. I love that. I love him trying to like hold the walkers back, just taking knives in the back as he's trying to hold them back in the walls. Fantastic. There's other characters that fell. Let me try not to miss anyone. Old mate Ed saved Sam one last time. Again, his was kind of a smaller moment, but there was the fantastic moment in the previous episode shared between the brothers of the Night's Watch that remain, that kind of brought a lot more weight to that moment. I do want to say that there is something in the way that Game of Thrones has handled. I feel like there was a more emotion that could have been pushed out of some of the deaths, and I'm not, if you guys really connected with it, I'm not, questioning that. For me, my thing is when a character dies, I'm always more interested in seeing the reaction to the people who it affects immediately. And I guess they kind of got that out of Jorah's death, with Daenerys kind of clinging him and seeing her pain. But there's not much when you film a dead body. You know what I mean? They're not doing anything. And it might hurt to see them fall, but it hurts us even more to see the pain of the people who are feeling that around them. So there was a couple of things where I think more could have been pushed out of that. Fantastic stuff in the crypt. Actually, my favorite stuff in this episode was the stuff shared between Sansa and Tyrion that, maybe we could have worked. Maybe her saying that you were the best of them, of her three terrible husbands. Well, not three terrible husbands, because obviously Tyrion was always the good guy and always did right by her. And seeing them kind of share what was almost I was like, this can't be their final moment. But having them share that moment when that bit of music kind of kicked up, just fantastic stuff. I feel like there was a lot more in this episode that I'm probably missing, but I've tried to cover kind of as much as I can. As I've said, I am kind of surprised that the White Walker threat seems to end here. I will say, I really like the fact that they increased the threat of the Night King. It's something I'd said, was he ever going to talk? Was he ever going to have anything more than just this ominous onward force? And the moment where Jon was about to charge him down and he just rose everyone back, I think that kind of brought it home for me. I was like, no, I get the Night King now. I get him as a threat. And while he might not ever be as terrifying to me as what Cersei is capable of, they definitely kind of brought him home in the end. And, kind of with the slow motion stuff and really kind of focusing on him, focusing on his face a lot more, with lighting that actually supports it. Because as I've said, I think Richard Brake was the best looking version of the Night King, considering we've had 3 separate actors play him now, I believe. I haven't really gotten around the look of the new version, but it did work for me in this episode, and I'm glad it worked kind of at the end. And there's other things that I feel like we could have got more out of in terms of the battle. Not by much, I'm surprised. What was Bran doing the whole time? I don't know. It made for some cool transitions between the crows and the dragons, but I was, like, what are you doing for this episode? I'm sure there might be something we see going forward that he was doing this the whole time. We might find out. But that was weird. I also really enjoy the fact that, considering this is the director of Battle of the Bastards, that Jon didn't have this gigantic impact on the battle. He managed to do a lot with the dragons, even though it felt like Daenerys did more. I like the fact that he wasn't the hero of this episode, that kind of was given to Arya. It was given to the characters that fell, Grey Worm had some fantastic stuff, Brienne, seeing Jaime fight alongside them. That was all incredible. And just, I think this just works as a battle just as a whole. So many visually creative ideas, and unfortunately, some of the choices in terms of what they wanted to do with practical lighting and this nighttime setting is going to cause some problems for a few people. But for me, I like the audacity of it, and I think that overrides everything. I think as a whole, while there is, of course, probably going to be a lot of questions about things that worked out logically that I might not have picked up on straight away, and if I haven't picked up on them straight away, I probably won't be too bothered by them when I find out other people talking about them down the track. But I think the audacity of this episode and the amount that does work far outweighs anything that doesn't. I'd go as far as saying this is a truly brilliant episode of TV, deserves whatever awards come its way. We've never seen, that's TV. We've never seen that. Game of Thrones manages to keep outdoing itself in the battles and in the spectacle. And as of, fans of the series have seen a change. We felt a change in the way the show's storytelling works. And yes, it's different, but I think what we have now is equally as amazing. So I'm keen to see where we're going from here. It's not what I expected at all. There's going to be a lot of kind of, I guess, cool down next week. Maybe not. We will see. But just, yeah, I'm probably going to watch that again right now. So those are my thoughts on Season 8, Episode 3 of Game of Thrones. What did you guys think of it? I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below. Where do we go from here? What is happening next? Keen to hear what you guys have to say. If you want to see more Game of Thrones reviews as well as other stuff from this channel, you can subscribe down there somewhere, as well as to my other channel over there somewhere. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Loverboy Media and on Instagram at Breaking Banter. And of course, if you do really want to help support this channel, you can support on Patreon. Thank you so much to you guys that are doing that already. You guys are amazing. I will see you all next week.